what would be most useful for you in our conversation today?
So I actually am trying to get into law school, and one way is to do Lsat, and I have tried multiple tests, multiple techniques to learn by my own self. I didn't have any tutor and all that stuff, so I didn't do any or I didn't even took any prep courses and all that though. But my point is to get to know more information about Lsat exam, and then maybe asking different packages you have and courses you have, and then how to improve my score in Lsat, because the test I'm taking, I'm not doing very good on those compared to what I should be doing.
Sure. And I'd be glad to help. Now, I've covered a lot of the basics already in the YouTube channel, the podcast, the blog. So I'm wondering what specific questions you have about the games, reasoning, or reading comp. Any particular weak areas you're struggling with, or questions about self-study?
Yeah, so I'm always unable to understand from the logic reasoning perspective, unable to understand the argument itself. So I'm always struggling to understand the argument. And then especially if it includes words which are scientific words, it just, I feel like I just didn't understood anything.
Right. And one thing I want you to remember is that, of course, it's never about the topic. It's only about the structure of the argument. And they throw in these science topics because they know that a lot of pre-law students don't like science. So that's meant to trip you up. Instead, you want to focus on the structure of the argument. What's the conclusion? Start there. What's the conclusion? Sometimes there are indicator words. Other times there aren't. But you've got to figure out what's the main point. What's the author trying to get across? Then look towards the evidence to see what information is supporting the argument. And then you want to evaluate for yourself to what extent is this reasonable given the evidence. And of course, there is always some kind of gap. And you want to think to yourself, is it a small gap? Is it a big gap? How could we strengthen? How could we weaken? But really engage with it in a real world sense.
Okay. And then, so what are the ways I can improve on logic reasoning? I've tried multiple ways of taking advice from different people who have taken the Lsat, and everyone have a different opinion. And then all those strategies for me aren't really working.
Yeah, I mean, no one way works for every single student. And so you'll hear a variety of different methods to solve it, methods to improve, and no one answer is right for you. So you got to look at what makes sense for you to apply to your own situation, and then form a kind of mix of different perspectives and opinions. And of course, you want to see whatever clicks for you best. And I have tons of information out there on logical reasoning. One thing you could do is do questions by type, like strengthen questions, weaken questions, do several of each type in a row to better see the patterns and better get an understanding of the proper perspective from which to view the argument. Another thing you want to think about is what your review process looks like to learn better from your mistakes.
Okay. And then, so you think the way to improve logical reasoning is making sure you know your own strategy, like how you understand, because I'm always unable to just understand the stimulus. I can always try to if I can understand stimulus, I can find the correct answer most of the time. It's just hard for me to understand even a very general stimulus too. So I just don't know how to improve that.
So start with the easiest logical reasoning questions and start paraphrasing them. Put them in your own words. So could you read the stimulus, then without looking at it, write down in a separate piece of paper what the stimulus is saying in your own words, and do that for progressively more difficult questions. So logical reasoning, it's nice that they give you the questions in a general order of difficulty. So question number 1 will typically be easier than question number 15, right? So you do questions 1 through 10 with this exercise, paraphrasing it, summarizing each one in your own words. Then move forward from there to questions 11 through 15, then 16 through 20. And if you want to check yourself, you could talk with a friend, a coach, a tutor, a study buddy, or look at explanations as well and see how your understanding matches up with that of others.
Okay. And then coming back to logic games, so there are times when I'm doing very good in logic games, but then there are times I'm struggling with question number 3 and 6, like middle questions, especially in the last one too. What are the ways I can improve on logic games?
Well, how many games have you done?
I have done multiple tests. So I would say probably mostly around, if I have to say in total, I would say probably more than 25 games, 25, okay. More than 30 games maybe.
And you're doing them as sections?
Yes, sometimes I'm just doing the whole prep test together. Sometimes
Right.
I'm just doing a game section, like a whole game section. So I'm only able to do 3 games within time. But then out of those 3 games, I'm just unable to do certain questions just because I think it takes a lot more time to diagram those questions. Is there any other way you think is better than diagramming, or what are the ways you think?
Well, you definitely want a diagram. Diagramming is important because you can't do everything in your head. It goes past the limits of normal working memory.
Okay.
But and when are you taking the LSAT, by the way?
My first one outside is actually in February.
Okay.
In less than 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that's one thing. And then I think my other question was this too. And then the reason I'm taking February one, just because I'm hoping I can start in fall, but then also I'm looking for good scholarships too. So that's another question I've heard, because before this I had no knowledge of okay, how do you apply and what are the process. I think I've learned a lot by watching your videos. So I've seen your YouTube channel, and then I've been following you on YouTube. So that's where I've learned a lot of the information. So I don't know if actually is a good time for me to take right now, or.
Yeah, so a couple of your interests here are at odds, because on the one hand, you want to take it now and apply this fall. On the other hand, you want scholarship money and presumably to get into the best law school possible. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, I would recommend waiting a cycle. Nobody ever wants to hear that, but it sounds to me like there's still a lot of work for you to do in terms of getting your LSAT score up and reaching your fullest potential on the LSAT. And if you do that, you will open the doors to getting into better schools and to getting more scholarship money. And so it's well worth waiting a year now. If you could get tens of thousands of dollars in scholarships or get into a better law school, you look at the ROI on that over the course of your entire career, it's huge. So I would say put February aside. It sounds like you still have a lot of work to do on logical reasoning and logic games, and maybe reading comp too. We haven't discussed that yet, but there's a lot you could be doing that you haven't done yet. And so if you want to maximize your odds of achieving your goals there, I would say wait a bit.
Okay. So, well, that was another thing and then this was one of the questions I wanted to ask. I'm already registered for the one in February. And then I also am planning to take one in June. So do you, what would be your advice to a person like this, that should I take the February one and just try, let's see how it goes, or should I cancel it? Because in terms of money, if I cancel it, I'm still paying more than half of the money. Or if I don't cancel it, how does that affect?
Right. So to me, there's no reason to take the LSAT if you don't think you'll be ready. Law schools, it's true, they don't average multiple scores. Rather, they only take the highest score. But there's no reason to have takes on your record if you could avoid it, because 1 or 2 takes is totally fine. But if you have 5, 6, 7 takes, doesn't look great. And you're already going to go for June, which I think could be a good option for you. But then you may want to retake after June. If you're waiting a cycle anyway, you might want to do June and then August, or June and then October. Those could be a couple of options for you. And so I wouldn't take it in February just to see how you'll do, because based on what you're telling me right now, you're probably not going to reach even close to your fullest potential. You only got 10 days, still tons of work for you to do.
True. I'm scoring 145 right now.
Mm-hmm.
And my aim or my goal is 155 to 160.
Right.
So I don't know. I was confused about this too. And then I thought I should probably ask you, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think any law school worth going to requires at least a 150 and probably higher than that.
You said 158?
I just said simply 150, but in reality, I think for most people, you want to get closer to 155 or 160 to get into any law school worth going to.
Okay. So you would highly recommend taking it in June and just changing the date?
Yeah, June at the earliest, really. But I want you to slow down and take some time to build your foundation first. You were asking about logic games. I want to get into that with you a little bit too, because you said you were doing full exams, you were doing sections as part of that. But what I haven't heard you talking about is doing questions by type to build the fundamentals first. So I would recommend typically, and this is in my study plans as well if you want more, to do games by type, then logical reasoning by type. And once you've built a basic familiarity in the different question types or game types in the section, then you pull it together with full sections. So I would say do a bunch of ordering games, then a bunch of grouping games, then a bunch of harder combination games, pattern, mapping, circle, all the rare ones. Then you pull it all together, doing an individual 35-minute timed logic game section. But to me, when you're just doing exam after exam, you're doing them all scrambled. So you're not really getting a full chance to see the patterns and commonalities between different game types or different logical reasoning types.
Okay. And then do you think how can one improve our reading comprehension though?
Yeah, sure. So that's a whole separate area. And to be honest, reading comp is more difficult to improve upon significantly than the other sections. But that being said, there are still techniques that I would recommend. The biggest one is actually a technique to avoid. Don't write down too much. It takes time to write things down. It takes time to read things. And most students, in my experience, tend towards too much note-taking. What's your reading comp approach like right now?
What do? I read the passage and then I try to retain most of it, and then I just read questions and I solve them. A lot of the times I'm doing it fine, but not so fine too. So it's like I'm making a lot of mistakes. I'm making sometimes half of the mistakes.
Right. I see. Okay. Well, one thing I would suggest for you is don't try to memorize everything in the passage, especially not all the content. Like logical reasoning, focus on the structure. How is the author going about making their argument? Especially just take away their viewpoint. What's their major viewpoint? What's the author's opinion? What's the primary purpose of the passage? Why did they write this? What are they trying to get across? The details, you can note where they are to come back later, but you don't need to memorize all the details up front.
Okay. And then coming back to the same question from logic reasoning section 2, how can I improve my understanding of the argument? Can you go through on that one more time, please?
Yeah, sure. So start with the conclusion. Identify the conclusion. Everything else follows from that. So what's the conclusion? What's the evidence? Then how you think to yourself, what is their method of reasoning? What type of argument are they making? For example, it could be an argument by analogy. Or if it's a flaw question or a flawed argument, it could be an ad hominem personal attack or a correlation causation argument. So just like there's question stem types, there are also various methods of reasoning. And as you work through more and more logical reasoning questions, you will start to see familiar patterns of reasoning or methods of reasoning repeating, and then it'll come more naturally to you so that you're not reinventing the wheel on test day, trying to develop an understanding of a question, of a method of reasoning that actually has come up many times before.
Okay. And then I was going through a lot of the information, and I saw your courses so how can I be your student in short if I have to ask that? And then do you think, because I do see that I can improve, because everything what I've done so far, I've done on my own, and I've seen a good improvement since the first day of, studying, and then since up till now. And I haven't really studied. I started studying a couple of weeks ago. So 3 weeks ago, probably, not more.
Right.
And I've seen good amount of improvement, but without any specific strategies or best ways to understand or solve questions and all that. So I am interested in your courses. So I want more information on that so I can learn from you and I can do really good on Lsat in June.
Awesome. Well, I'm inspired by your motivation here, and I'd love to have you in the courses. And so it's just a question of choosing the option that's right for you. The top level course includes live group coaching with me, as well as my live master classes and Q&As. And those are all online. And if you ever can't make a session live, you can watch the recording later. And you also have access to all my on-demand video lessons covering the basics of all sections of the exam, games, reasoning, and reading comp, as well as test day prep, as well as mindset, as well as even a bit on admissions as well, like your personal statement. So I pull it all together with the basics, and then I also give you plenty of live classes. I have dozens and dozens of them inside the course. And you also get a special study plan so that you know exactly what to be doing every single day over the course of your prep, specifically which LSAT course video lessons to complete before doing practice problems of that type. But if you have questions or you need clarification, of course, you can come to class and ask your questions directly. And if you can't ever make a class, you can always submit your questions in advance, and I'll do my best to cover them during the class.
Okay. And then, so how does that work? How many times in a week do we have a class, or in a couple of weeks do we have a couple of classes? How does that work?
So I'll typically run 2 live group coaching calls each month, typically on the first Monday night and the third Monday night of the month. I also run a handful of live masterclasses and Q&As throughout the month. They're usually on weeknights, and so I'll typically run 2 to 4 of those per month as well.
Okay. And then, do you think I can significantly improve by being enrolled in those classes? Like,
certainly. I mean, it'll
question though, but
of course. I mean, I think that I've seen many students make significant progress using my materials, and the best thing is that I'm giving you a cohesive, defined plan of attack, because the alternative really is watching lots of free stuff here and there and getting advice from a variety of sources, whether they're friends or people on message boards, but it's not a defined, cohesive system telling you exactly what to be doing every single day, removing all the guesswork. I've organized all my best Lsat information from 15 years of teaching this exam into a clear system for you to use.
because I would be interested. And then, so if I'm taking in June, when should I start enrolling in your courses then? Because I want to do it as soon as possible. Because I'm also going to a grad school right now, so I'm graduating in May. So I'm like in a very crunch time where I don't have a lot of time to maybe wait and
Sure.
other issues,
I would say the sooner the better, because the sooner you start, the sooner you're developing better habits and more efficient strategies you can apply immediately.
Okay, so do you think if I start right now, like from this week, I will be starting from basics, like no matter what, doesn't matter how much I know and how much I don't know, I'm going to be starting from the very first page, and then we'll move towards second, third, and fourth, and fifth, and that's how it's going to
That's my recommendation for you, to build the foundation first, because you said you're having trouble with understanding arguments and logical reasoning. So we got to go back to the basics, square one. And logic games, again, doing them by type to see the patterns. That's starting back from the beginning.
So is it more like watching your videos and learning the ways you have recorded your videos about question types and watching those and understanding those questions through that?
So that's a lot of the work, but there's also the live classes, the live master classes and Q&As, the live group coaching. So those are chances to ask your questions.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to share with me after, like, I've discussed a lot of the things? So do you think, what should I do? What should be my plan now?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say to you is don't be discouraged. Like, you can do this, and you're giving yourself the time now till June. 4 months, you can make anything happen. And if you arm yourself with the best resources possible and you give yourself a clear plan of attack, then you'll be building a strong foundation from the beginning. And there's only room to go up.
And you really think I should not really give the February one?
I don't see any benefit to doing it. And then you're going to have either a low score on record or a cancellation, which are better to avoid if possible.
And both of them, it's better to avoid both of them.
Yeah, I don't really see any benefit to them. I mean, if you want to take a timed exam, go take a timed exam. It doesn't need to be proctored by LSAC where it's showing up on your record.
Okay. Yeah, I'll think about changing the date, just because my family really wants me to take it, because you're like already registered to just go take it, as long as it doesn't really affect the admission later on.
But admissions will see it.
Yeah, they will see it. Sounds good. I think these are the only questions I have, because I was struggling with a lot of logical reasoning because it has 2 sections in it. And then when I was looking at my score, which was like 155, which I'm aiming for. So I was wondering, I don't even have to I just have to be more accurate of like how many questions I need to do them correctly. But then I was unable to do it. I was getting 12 points in logic reasoning, or 10 to 12 marks out of 25, which I was only able to do 17 questions. So I was getting 10 right out of 17 or 12 right. But then the rest were like flukes, like just do, because I was running out of the time. So I don't know if that's something I can improve too with time.
Absolutely. Definitely. Accuracy and pacing, those are big parts of it. And that's something I work on in the study plans too.
Because I was reading the same stimulus again and again and again and again to understand it. Yeah, so I think I'll probably work on that. Thank you so much for your time.
So before we sign off, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
I think the support. I think the support, and not only support in terms of like motivating the other person, but it's also most like encouraging people, which a lot of the people don't do it. It's very easy to discourage people by just saying one sentence, but it's very hard to encourage people. So I think I am motivated, and I believe that I can do it, but I think sometimes we need a little extra push. I think which you're great at it. I've seen a lot of your videos, so I think I really appreciate the support and the help you're doing. And then also, apart from that, you being able to understand, okay, it doesn't have he's not from here, but he still have financial needs. So I can still find a different way to help him. So I think that says a lot. That says a lot about you and your personality, and then your work too, probably, because you're not only like working to make money, you're also like helping people out there, which is actually a term, like helping people out, not actually just saying, yes, I'm working, so I'm helping people out there. So I think that is very encouraging, and that's very motivating to see you out there and then pushing us to achieve our goals and needs.
Awesome. I'm really glad I was able to help. Please keep in touch and we'll talk soon.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Thank you so much.